So, good afternoon or good evening. I'm not sure what this qualifies. Sort of in between, I think. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we gather to mark an extraordinary anniversary. On the 9th of March, 1776, exactly 250 years ago today, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations was published in London. Few books have shaped our understanding of prosperity and society as profoundly as this book. It is important to remember this because human beings have a curious tendency to rediscover all truths as if they were new, but sometimes also to forget them. Ideas that once seemed obvious can, within a generation or two, become contested or even lost. That is one reason why it matters to return to great works of the past. Celebrating anniversaries serve this purpose. They remind us that knowledge and wisdom must be repeated and rediscovered generation by generation, because ideas like these are never permanently secure. They must be remembered, repeated, defended. And The Wealth of Nations is not merely an old book. It is part of a tradition of ideas that helped shape the modern world. And Adam Smith helped us see something both simple and profound. Prosperity is not primarily created by rulers directing society, but by ordinary people cooperating with one another and through specialization, exchange, and competition. Through institutions that allow individuals to pursue their own plans, and in doing so, contribute to the welfare of others. In other words, peaceful coexistence through mutual gains from trade. Here is why Smith is also credited as the father of political economy. But the ideas have wider implication and became the foundation of a liberal tradition. The ideas that societies flourish when individuals are free, when exchange is voluntary, and when institutions allow people to coordinate their activities without central directions. And at the heart of that tradition lies a simple principle: freedom. He reminds us that flourishing society does not arise from control, protectionism, or political management of economic life. It arises when people are free to create, exchange, innovate, cooperate under institutions of justice. Some think that such a society benefits only the rich and powerful. That is misguided. A flourishing society benefits us all. So that is why it is fitting that we gather here today, 250 years later, not only to celebrate Adam Smith, but to reflect on the enduring relevance of his ideas. And we are fortunate to have two excellent guides for that conversation. Guides that provide us with some sort of perspective on whether or not this tradition is alive and well. We have a pessimist, Adam Smith, of Daniel Klein yeah. Adam Smith was not a pessimist. We have another pessimist with us today. Dan Klein, professor of George Mason University and the Mercatus Center, one of the leading contemporary scholars of Adam Smith. His talk today is titled Adam Smith, Moral Authority of 76. And he has also published a short work today in Swedish on that theme, Den moraliska auktoriteten från 1776. And our second speaker, the optimist, is Johan Norberg, author, lecturer, documentary filmmaker, a joymaker, a joyous personality, I would say, whose work has introduced millions of readers around the world to the history and promise of liberal ideas. Johan will speak on Adam Smith and the liberal arc in Sweden. So, join me in welcoming our first speaker, Professor Daniel Klein.
Thank you for that nice introduction. Oh, sorry. I think I'd use this one. Yeah, I'll try to live up to my reputation as a pessimist. No, we have to remain cheerful, of course. It's one of the virtues, for sure, and hope springs eternal. But Lotta mentioned that I had a piece published today at Smithian on Adam Smith's moral authority. And that's actually the theme I have to talk to you about, Smith's as a moral authority. And that relates to the pessimism, because the question is, who are our moral authorities today? You spoke of wisdom and virtue, and do we have processes that are selecting for wisdom and virtue which become recognized and become actual moral authorities, so that when people say something wise, it somehow actually people heed it and listen and act on it, which remarkably they did for Smith. So let's think a little bit about that and how Smith achieved that. So his moral authorizations, I think, were really important. I don't have a chart here, but you've maybe seen the chart of per capita GDP over time. Go back to, say, the year 1000, and you go through the centuries, and it goes like this. And you come up here to about 1600, and then 1700, and then 1800, and it goes like this. This is the so-called hockey stick, the blade of the hockey stick. Deirdre McCloskey calls that the Great Enrichment. And really, that starts picking up and becoming steep quickly right around this, when this came out. So I say this was the cause. He did it. Thank you. He made us rich. We can be here today and enjoy this. But I'm serious. I'm kind of serious about that. I do think he's part of a grand movement. I think he's kind of the crest of that movement. I would say my favorite articulation of that era movement, that really was an arc, a liberal arc, as Johan's going to talk about in a broader way, across countries. And so something really interesting happened then. In 1776, I'm an American, so we also have other things happening in 1776, which also involved remarkable developments and moral authorities, okay? Important, founders, founding fathers. So that's what we're talking about today, and I'll come back to the nature of Smith's moral authorities, but that's what I want to dwell on a bit. And the first thing I want to do is talk about, can I have the next slide? Oh, I do it. Okay, thank you. That's not it. There we go. I want to talk about two moral authorities. I'll explain this in a minute. There's a lot in here, and it's a very wide survey of public policy issues, really. Part of the power and impressiveness of this work, 1776, is the breadth of coverage, the comprehensiveness of public policy analysis and commentary. There's a lot of other things about it that were remarkable in the way it kind of used certain formulations and categorizations to kind of treat everything. So it's a major work. But I do think at the center of it are principles like Lotta introduced already. And I want to speak of those as moral authorizations. They're messages, they're teachings, but they're more than that, and they worked as more than that. So he's reflecting, doing economic philosophy and contemplation, talking to people like David Hume, reading all these other scholars. And these other thinkers, they had a lot of these ideas. Joseph Schumpeter once said that there's hardly a new idea in these two volumes. And while I don't agree with that exactly, there's a certain grain of truth in it, in that the most central things we associate with Smith, like mutual gains, like the invisible hand, well, you guys know Schedenius. He beat Adam Smith, and he wasn't the only one. There were plenty of people in England and in France who did so. But he thought about things, and one of his messages is to the general ordinary person, okay? the everyman. And that moral authorization is kind of like the message here to that ordinary person is it's okay to focus on things close to home. It's okay to focus on what is actually focal to you, like your own well-being, your family's well-being, your friends' well-being, your neighborhood's well-being, your parish's well-being. He morally authorized this in a brilliant way, and particularly in economic life. One way to think about it in economic life is that he morally authorized the pursuit of honest income. The pursuit of honest income. Now that's part of your own well-being, your family's well-being. There is a strong emphasis on economics here and market signals, profit and loss, prices, and so on. And the argument he develops for that is, well, in markets, people are exchanging voluntarily. And if you're getting rich selling them some product, let's say bread, that reflects their willingness to pay voluntarily for your bread. And therefore, you are getting richer, more income, by actually serving your customers. And guess what? Your customers are part of society. You're serving society. It's very natural, right? And so this whole system of voluntary exchange, the selling of bread, also the making of bread, and therefore hiring people to make bread, paying them wages voluntarily, them taking the jobs voluntarily. How do you drive up workers' wages? By demanding their labor. So the pursuit of honest income, he is showing, has these healthy feedback mechanisms. Customers buy the bread they like at a good deal, a lower price. Competition works to lower the prices among the different bakers, and this actually creates more benefit for the consumer and in the labor market for the producer, the worker. So he is actually endorsing the principle which he teaches in his earlier book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, that you are actually advancing the good of the whole. The good of the whole. It's not that you just have a right to your income. It's not as though, it's not like he starts there. It's not taken as some premise. You have to justify conduct. You have to justify your claims of, let's say, pursuit of honest income, profit making, which we have a lot of instincts against. If you just say, oh, this guy's out to make income, that doesn't sound very nice. That doesn't sound like a pursuit of the good of the whole, which is what this is all about from the point of view of the impartial spectator or God. The pursuit of honest income. What's so great, what's so moral about that? Well, he explains what's so moral about it. And he's saying that in this process of the market, this honest pursuit of income, not any income, honest income, has these healthy mechanisms that actually serve society. Now, why is it that this gets such a moral authorization? He says, oh, you can maybe imagine other ways to serve the good of the whole, to be beautiful in God's eyes. But how effective are they? Ought implies can. And can I be very effective in serving the good of the whole when I get farther and farther away from home? When I get farther and farther away from my family and my friends and the customers who come to my store? How do I help people who are far away? Do I have the relationships? Do I have the knowledge? Do I have the benevolence, sincerely? And he is teaching in both books, actually, that our comprehension, our control, our relationships are very limited. Maybe we could help a charity and people far away, but to really be effective, you'd have to get to know them. You'd have to develop a relationship. Just like today, if you want to give to a charity, you don't just send a check off to some name, you need to kind of befriend them, actually, to know if you're being effective. But if you think about it, now you're back to helping your friends. And in a sense, it's closer to home again, in a sense of sympathy or moral relationship. So he's saying, look, there may not be a better way for you to help society than to help you and your family. After all, the lesson of this, or not the lesson, but the command, the precept, is serve the good of the whole. And that is our constant demand on us. I don't care if you're religious or not. That is our constant demand on us. Serve the good of the whole. That does not mean serve everybody except yourself, because you are part of the whole. And if every part took good care of itself, the whole would be well taken care of. So it's fine to serve you, your family, your friends, your neighborhood. If every part took good care of itself, the whole would be well taken care of. And he's teaching us to rely on ourselves, to be virtuous at home, to be good family members, good friends, good neighbors, and so forth. So he told people it's okay to focus on stuff close to home, like honest income, and this invigorated economic life. It made people say, yeah, God's with me. Not only am I innocent in God's eyes, but I have God's presumptive praise and approval in making profit. And you know, Smith wasn't original in this. Preachers were saying this, like Richard Baxter, and before him, William Perkins. So it's not as though Smith was coming up with this, but he was morally authorizing it from a different standing and in a very impressive way. And this invigoration includes innovation, where now, hey, honest income, whatever it is, it's not necessarily just a bunch of sanctified callings that are on a list, a short list of sanctified callings. You know, like if you look at the gravestones in Stockholm at the graveyards, you'll see shoemaker, baker, carpenter. Those are like sanctified callings. And that's a very important thing to have pride in. And that's what the Lutherans and the Calvinists and the English clerics encouraged people to take pride in. And he did it in this fashion. He encouraged the same thing, but he broadened the whole notion of honest income to whatever is honest. No intimidation, no coercion, no misrepresentation. Honest income, I don't care what it is. It's not this list of 15 callings. Make up a new calling, switch callings, innovate, make a new product. And it's the innovation, this wide open, hey, it's honest, and I can make honest income from it. That's what causes that acceleration in the blade of the hockey stick, innovation. So that's the first one, and that's one reason why he caused, you could say he caused it. The other one is him speaking to the policymaker, and he's saying to them, let people pursue honest income, liberalize, free markets. And that was his general policy prescription. That was his presumption. It wasn't an absolute maxim or an absolute axiom, I should say. He made his exceptions. He felt in some cases you wouldn't want free markets. But generally, that's where the presumption lies. And like the presumption of innocence, it's up to the contravenor to make the case and overcome the burden of proof to say, no, 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 we should have a control, a regulation, or intervention in some areas. And they listened to him. When are they going to start listening to you? I'm sure we're going to get there. So they listened to him, and they liberalized, and there was a general movement in that direction. And now, I want to say, so those are his two main moral authorizations, which somehow took. Now, how did he have such moral authority? I want to just speak about a couple of points on this and then wrap up. One point. His first book is a book about morals. It's a book about virtues. He was a moralist. This was a well-received book. It came out in 1759, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And so he was a moral philosophy professor at Glasgow, and he was he was regarded warmly and widely. He had a certain Santa Claus personality about him. He really did. And so that's one reason. It's like, hey, these are decent arguments. This is like long and exhaustive. It's really dull to read the digression on silver. And so, you know, and so why does people listen to this? Well, it's because it's a moral authority. You know, if people would only read Ratio's working papers, you know, and actually feel it's a moral authority, what a difference that would make. So he was a moral authority by being a moralist and a philosopher of virtue. That's number one. Number two, he was in Scotland, lowland Scotland, Glasgow, Edinburgh, other universities like St. Andrews and Aberdeen. And he's in that crowd. And he's kind of, that crowd is a kind of cultural mountain peak at the time. And somehow it worked so that people regarded what they had to say. There was a kind of circle of peers, and Smith was pretty much a first among his peers. And so people all over Europe who recognized these mountain peaks in Paris, in Scotland, in Naples, and elsewhere, they somehow this was of great interest elsewhere, as Johan will tell us about Sweden. And so there was a kind of sociology of judgment which created and backed up this moral authority status, which is important. Now, one aspect of that, which I want to note, is that in Scotland, does anyone know what happened in Scotland in 1707? Anybody? Yes. Yes, the Parliament closed up shop in Edinburgh, and the parliamentarians went down to Westminster. In other words, the political class moved out. Isn't that makes a lot of room for the thinkers. Just think about it, right? And so that's important, and it's important to think of Smith as from the periphery, as not being so caught up in the vortex of the capital city, or the imperial city in the case of London. And so it's important to think about the periphery here. And also it's important to think about the moral authority of the periphery, and people thinking good moral thoughts outside the vortex of the capital, okay? And this also kind of relates to the United States, because after all, Boston was far away. Finally, from London, that is. The last point, there was a freshness to these lessons. There was a, print culture that was developing, a literacy, and an excitement about the idea of these basic ideas, these basic insights, kind of like the low-hanging fruit of understanding society, that was exciting and fresh, and which now we've heard so many times and doesn't feel so fresh. How do you stand out when Milton Friedman has said it all better than you ever will 100 times? And so many others have as well, like Johan, for example. So there was a freshness. So the point I want to make, and this is the pessimism, is like, how do we get back to moral authority, where like actual wisdom and virtue, first of all, is selected for and is recognized, and therefore has actual oomph, impact. Like that's kind of the thing. And so finally, let me just say, this moral authority is very related to the economic analysis of price signals and profit and loss signals. Because what we're trying to do our best, we're trying to serve the good of the whole and win the approval of the impartial spectator, and we need signals. And just as this told us that actually honest income is a healthy, good signal, we need signals in society from other people, including moral authorities. And so it's another form of signals that we are trying to, understand and guide us, and to have guide us. Thank you.